1, 2, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
It goes to red. If I put this.
If I do this, then it should be okay. Then I think you can put it on the.
Just a second. Make sure you get some handouts, please.
Okay. Oh, this is one. Yeah. Good. You got a pen?
Oh, I will give it to you. Just 1 second. Hello. 1, 2.
Is that? Put it on the other side. I think that's okay.
It's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, I think this should work fine. Yeah.
One last thing. Are you recording there?
Yeah, I'm recording everything. It captures the screen.
F5. Sorry.
Oh, good.
Excellent. Good. No problem. You haven't sent that email, then?
I would.
If I was
1, 2, 3. People cannot hear my voice, I think. Hello.
You haven't muted this, no?
Hello. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Hello. Can you hear me? Hello. I need to put this closer. I think we're all good. Handouts, please. Put this. And
When you finish, we'll be downstairs.
Yep.
See you later.
okay, you got pen. Okay. Okay, welcome everyone to the first week of comparative growth in Asia and Africa. Okay. The course conveners, I'm going to teach term 1. I'm Ramin. Sonali is going to teach term 2, and the tutorials will be handled by Sana and me, and you have our emails there. A little bit about myself. You know, my office hours are on Wednesday, 10 to 12, room 282 in this building. My email is rn26. A bit of background. I've been educated at University of Oxford, London School of Economics, and I got my PhD from Queen Mary University. My academic passion is oil. Is oil something good for economic development or bad? Why? Norway has been very effective in using its natural resources while Nigeria have failed to do that. That's my academic passion. Now, for the last 2 consecutive years, I have won the teaching awards because of this course. So, I put a lot of effort in it, and you realize that you need to put a lot of effort in this, and it's going to pay off in the end. Now, about the emails, you get the general point. Don't send me informal emails. This is how I behave when I receive an informal email from you saying, hey Ramin, how's everything, you know, no. I'm expecting formal emails. If you send me an informal email, I don't reply. So make sure you stay formal. Okay. Assessment. 70% of your assessment is exam-based. It's 3 hours, 3 questions, and it's going to be on April, May 2017. Then you got 1 assessed essay, 20% of your total mark. The deadline is Monday, 20th of March. Basically, we're talking about the end of the 2nd term. The word limit is 2,500. Then, the remaining 10% is an assessed presentation that you're going to give in your tutorials. You have 20 minutes for the presentation. And we will give you the details of these presentations in your first tutorial. And your first tutorials are going to start the next week. There is no tutorial in this week. So in the next week, we're going to talk about the presentation. What do we expect? When are you going to present? So don't panic about the presentations. Any questions? Please get some handouts. Any questions? This is what we're going to talk about in term 1. These are the topics. The general question is really down to 3 main parts. First, 2 weeks, is we're going to talk about how we measure development. You know, is it about increase in income, becoming rich in money terms? Is it more than that? Is it having a happy life? Is it having a healthy and access to good education and free life? We're going to discuss these. What do we mean by development? And I'm going to argue that a major part of development is income. It's about becoming rich. It's not all of it, but it's a major part, right? The first, weeks 3 and 4, we're going to talk about what happened, basically. Which countries grew rich? Why? What was their growth rate? Which countries were left behind? It's divided in 2 parts. First, we're going to talk about the 19th century when, Britain, United States, Germany, and mainly the rich countries became rich. And then we're going to talk about 1950 when some developing countries like South Korea, Taiwan, Japan became rich and the others were left behind. Now, the third part of this term 1 is the most important part. We're going to talk about why. Why some countries managed to become rich and why others have failed to catch up. And this is the oldest question in social science. If you're not interested in this question, leave the lecture theater right now. And the last 2 weeks, we're going to focus on specific countries. South Korea, a successful case, a miracle case of economic development. We're basically talking about a country that from 2 generations went from one of the poorest countries in the world to an OECD country. A truly miracle story. Right? I'm pretty sure that if you talk to your classmates from South Korea, they have interesting stories to tell about their grandparents, their life in poverty, and now the grandchildren are living a very different life. Then we're going to talk about Nigeria, and with Nigeria as a failure story. And we're going to see whether is it really a failure story, is it changing, is it not changing, why? Any questions? Okay, term 2, Sonali is going to teach it, and she's going to go through the topics with you in detail. Let me put this somewhere safe and carry on. Okay. Now, why is it important to study economic growth? This course is called Narrative Growth. Thank you. In Asia and Africa. So, the first question, why study growth? why I'm asking you to come over at 3 o'clock in this lecture theater in this beautiful weather and study economic growth. Anyone? Let me ask this. When we're saying economic growth, is growth in what? Gross domestic product. Very good. I want an easier, what's your name? Sorry? Safak. I want an easier answer. Sorry? We already mentioned, Safak already mentioned gross domestic product. Yes? Output. In what output? Economic output. May I know your name? Nindu. Thank you. Nindu. Lindu. Yeah, there? Thank you. Yes? Aggregate demand and aggregate supply. May I know your name? Hannah. All of you are correct, but a simpler answer. Yes?
Productive potential. Increase in productive
Potential,
potential.
I would say no. I need to, it's still complicated. Yes? State of life, we're getting close.
Just generally how people are poor or rich.
Poor or rich. Let me focus it with, okay, last one. Living standards is very close, but I'll replace it with something close enough. Income. Growth in income. When your income grows, we think you have a better standard of living. You can access a better life. If you're poor, you can buy food, you can buy clothes, you can buy a house. As a country, if you're becoming rich, we can pay tax, we can have an NHS, we can have a school system. So this is why you're here. Increase in income matters. It's a big part of development. Remember, whenever we're talking about growth, is the increase in income. And we are mainly interested in increase in income per person. Why? Because imagine you're a country, a class as a country. As a person who's interested in development, I'm not really interested in what's happening to the total income of this class. Why? Because you might have a billionaire who's becoming rich and rich, right? And the rest of you are not becoming rich. What happens to the total income? It's increasing. So I'm interested in average income. I want to know the income per person, whether the average person, the living standard of the average person is improving or not. So income per person can be a measure of development, a measure of development. Any questions? Second part, as you said, comparative growth in Asia and Africa. Why compare Asia and Africa? Hannah?
Because some have succeeded in their growth and some haven't. So
Some?
have succeeded and they've been able to come out of being developing.
So let's repeat that again.
I think you're wrong.
Sorry?
You want me to?
No. You impressed me. Spot on. The first answer. Could you repeat that, Hannah?
To compare the ones that were able to come out, stop becoming a developing country and like Japan and like South Korea, and comparing that to how you're saying with Nigeria and Africa.
Exactly. Thank you. You are comparing the most successful region in the developing world to the least successful region in the developing world. So it's a good contrast. The higher, the most rapidly growing economies with the ones that have not grown at a fast pace. I don't want to call it failure. We'll see why. Right? I don't like to stigmatize, Africa as one country, everybody is poor, give us 5p, save 10 children. No, buy one, get one free. No, not that stuff, okay? But we can agree that they have been less successful in terms of growth. And we will see why. Just a second. This is the thing you're going to do a lot during the course of comparative growth. Let me find the browser here. Okay. You can access very simple data. By saying public Google data. Public Google data. Yeah. World Development Indicators. We're interested in income per person. Yes? Yeah. Let's look at different regions. East Asia, South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and North America. Yeah? Most of you were born in the 1990s, so these things happened in your lifetime. Think about it. In your lifetime, the average income of a people in East Asia rose from $4,000 to $14,000. More than tripled. The income per person, the standard of living, let's say, tripled in East Asia just in your lifetime. Now let's compare it to what happened in Sub-Saharan Africa. The beginning, 2,500, let's say. In the end, 3,500. Not a lot of change. Not a lot of change. So you have a tremendous growth in here, a lot of success stories. South Asia, not bad, 5,000 at the beginning, 1,000. Not much, doubled. South Asia, we're talking here, a lot of successful stories. India, Bangladesh, a lot of success stories here. So you can see, very rapidly growing economies with laggards. Any questions? Bear in mind, we're talking about GDP per person or income per person. We'll get to that. Okay. Comparing the most successful region with the least successful one. Now, I have left the blank here for the questions for you, sorry, to fill out. So we're comparing the most successful with the least successful region in order to know why some countries are becoming rich and while others are failing. Yes? Handouts, of course. Yes, yes, yes. Anyone without a handout? Yes. To know which factors caused economic growth and which factors didn't. This is the whole point of comparison. So, this course is not just about Africa and Asia. It goes beyond it. It goes beyond it and tries to find out why some countries have managed to grow at a high pace while others have left behind. And so, why we do this, basically, to help to learn lessons for today. The most important part. What is the motto of SOAS? Anyone? Who said it? Knowledge is power. Could you remind me of your name? Hamza, thank you. Knowledge is power. That means that knowledge is not for its own sake. Knowledge is for changing the world. So the end of the day is to help poor countries become rich. You're learning all these to learn lessons for today, to apply it for poor countries and help them become rich. So I hope I've managed to convince you to tell you why it is important to study comparative growth in Asia and Africa. Now, how do we measure growth in income? How we measure growth in income per capita? Sorry? To compare. We compare what to the previous years? Yeah. Now let me go. What's your name? Eric. Eric, how do I compute the income for today? Safa, yes? Sorry? Could you repeat the answer you gave us for the first question? When I asked you why we should care about economic growth, what was your answer?
Pretty sure I didn't give the answer, but we should care about economic growth because it shows how developed the countries or how much is developing.
But how do we measure economic growth? GDP, exactly. We calculate the GDP or income. We calculate the GDP compared to the last year's. We calculate the changes in the domestic product in a given period. So as Eric mentioned, we're interested in change in the GDP. So first, we have to calculate the GDP and then see the changes. So we need to talk about this thing called GDP. Everybody's obsessed with it, you know. Everybody keep talking about this concept. So, GDP, let me give you a little bit of history. I'm a historian, so you get a lot of history from me. GDP was all about measuring the size of the economy, right? So the statesmen were always interested in measuring the size of the economy from day one. Guess why? Taxation. Taxation is the most important thing. So they wanted to measure the size of economic activity. Is income growing so I can raise tax rates and increase my revenue? Is income reducing so I should reduce tax rates, right, to encourage growth and expand my revenues? Now, the person who invented this GDP is this guy called Simon Kuznets, and he won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 1971. He basically started the preliminary things about GDP in the Great Depression of the 1930s. That era, that depression provided the main impetus for measuring the economy. And then the World War II. War is the mother of all inventions, right? Because of the war, you know, the rich countries wanted to know the size of the economy and their ability, the potential to produce goods, so that they can plan for war. And afterwards, this whole GDP concept became very important because of Cold War rivalries. Which superpower is growing at a faster rate than the other? Basically, a whole discipline of studying economic growth was connected to the Cold War politics, the Cold War rivalry. And according to, I think according to CGAA or somewhere, this says GDP is one of the most important inventions of the 20th century. So if you want to be very philosophical, at 3:30 p.m., right, is that this is one of the most important concepts in economics. The GDP is not out there. It doesn't exist out there. It's all in our mind, but it's so important. So, and I would argue 95% of the people get it wrong. So we're going to talk about this today, and it's very important that you get it right. Now, gross domestic product is the total value of goods and services produced in the economy. Imagine you're an economy, right? We have different sectors, you know. Name the general sectors of an economy.
Sex.
Sorry?
Sex.
Service sector, very good, like tourism, what else? Finance, yes. Education and retailing. So very high profitable service sector to not very profitable sector. To waitering, yeah. The other sector is manufacturing, like producing the iPhones in your pockets, producing this thing here, and producing our clothes, and to agriculture, producing the raw materials that produce these clothes, and the tables here, and the things we eat, okay? So, let's say you have an economy and you're engaged with these sectors. I can go and add up the monetary value of all the goods and services and manufacturing output that you produced per year. Now this should equal to total expenditures in this class. Why? Because we assume that as a closed economy, the things you produce, you sell them. Right? People buy those goods. So the total value of goods and products you produce should equal the amount of total expenditures. And when you produce a good, I buy it from you, I give money to you, and that money is your income. So the total expenditures should equal the total income. Remember, your expenditures is always someone else's income. So at the aggregate level, the expenditure of this class should equal the income of this class, should equal the value of all the productive activities you've done. Any questions? Let me start. Now let's go to the components of each of these. Right. Let me give you an example. Let's think about the BMW factory. The seller in this side and the buyers in here. Each BMW is produced by the factory and it costs £10,000. Okay? Now, one family comes over and buys one of these BMWs. That's for their leisure. We call this consumption. Yes? Everybody fine? Now, the second one is a business company. They rent out cars. And they come over and buy the second BMW. We call this investment. Why? Because the business is not buying this for the leisure. It's buying this to earn income in the future. Business to business transaction here. Investment. This is very important. Okay? So the total value of products produced, £20,000. The third person is the government. The police force comes over here and says, I cannot produce my own car, I'll buy it from you. The third BMW, the government buys it. We call this government expenditures. And the fourth BMW is sold to a foreigner in Germany. We call this exports. So the idea is the components of expenditure is private consumption, private investment, government expenditures, and exports. Yes? Now, what is the total value of goods and produced? £40,000. This is the income for the BMW. Now this income gets distributed to all the people who have directly or indirectly contributed to the production of BMWs. It could be the landlord who's renting the land, who's giving out the land for BMW factory. It could be the person who have financed the BMW project, for instance, gave a loan to the BMW company. most importantly, is all the workers in the BMW, from the CEO to the engineers to the shop floor person. We call them workers. Yeah? And lastly, the money for the investors. So, the consumption here, remember, each of them bought one BMW. It was £10,000 per person. The aggregate income is 40,000. Now this income gets distributed among the people who have directly and indirectly contributed. 10,000K of it goes to the landlord. 10,000K of that goes to all the workers, from managers to the cleaner to the engineers. 15,000 of it goes to the shareholders, and 5,000 of it goes to the bank, the people who lend money to the BMW. So the component of income is rent, wage, profit, interest. Let's zoom out as the aggregate economy. These guys who were these guys who earned income out of selling BMW become consumers for other products. Right? So as the aggregate economy, we are simultaneously buyers and sellers from each good. So now think about this. Let's do this exercise for every sector in the UK and add everything together. We get this. The total value of goods and services produced in the UK is £2.5 trillion in 2014. From the services, BMW, agriculture, everything. In 2000. This should equal the amount of total expenditures in the UK. And this should equal the total income in the UK. Now, one thing we need to add is this. Sometimes we spend on goods that are not produced in here. So far, we only imagine the closed economy here. Imagine that you can trade with another country. Sometimes, you buy goods from them. So your expenditure is not automatically on goods produced in this economy. It's on the goods produced in the other economy. So we need to subtract that. Yeah? Now, I have 3 ways of measuring GDP here. I can walk to this class and don't look at you, just look at the monetary values of goods and services you produced. I note them down. I'm interested in output. I'm not interested in you. I'm not surveying you. I'm just measuring the monetary value of your outputs. And this is called production approach. I look at what was the total value of goods produced in the agriculture, raw materials, manufacturing, finance. I add them all together. I get the total output. Or the next time, I cannot afford to do that. I come over here and say, what was your income this year? What was your income this year? What was your income this year? And I add everything together. The income approach. Some of you are landowners. Some of you are wage workers. Some of you are shareholders. Some of you have earned your income by just depositing your money in a bank. Of course, there is overlap. We're simplifying. You can be a wage worker and a shareholder. Right? We're simplifying things. Any questions? I'm expecting this to come up. Yes?
This is probably a stupid question. What if money is held but it's not put in the bank, it's not spent anywhere, it's just simply left lying around?
Very good. Let's take one step back. Forgot your name.
You never asked it.
Sorry.
Tresco.
Tresco. Thank you, Tresco. So, I was exactly waiting for Tresco to ask that question. And that's the point. We don't spend all of our income. Yeah. Let's take one step back. I was waiting for a student to say this. You don't spend all of your income, you save it. But the issue is that what happens to the saving? You give it to someone else for the expenditure. The bank doesn't hold it, it gives it to another person. So your savings get spent by someone else, so it's get recycled. So that is why the total income is equal to the total expenditures. Your savings get recycled in the economy through mostly investment expenditures. The money that you put in the bank is loaned out to a Carphone warehouse that wants to expand. When the Carphone warehouse wants to expand, it needs equipment. It has to go buy investment goods. Right? Now, all of these things have a lot of problems. Do we sell all the goods we produce? No. Part of it is inventory. Right? So if you want to complicate things, when you are adding this, you have to think about the inventory as well. The inventory is unsold good. It's nobody's income, nobody's expenditure. Or what happens if I produce food in my backyard and eat it? Is it part of the GDP? No, it's not traded. So, in reality, is the value of goods and services produced and traded in the economy. This is very important. Value of goods and services produced and traded in the economy. Now, let's go through our exercise. As I said, we don't care about the aggregate level of GDP. Did you know that the aggregate GDP of UK was 2.5 trillion? Have you ever heard about the aggregate income of UK? Anyone? I challenge you. I had to spend hours, finding, Fortune and all. I have to either, I think I've subtracted from the income per capita. So we're interested in the income of average person in the UK. So we roughly do this exercise. We divide the total income by the number of people, 80 million people, and we get £31,000 income per person. Standard of living. Any questions? Okay, let's move forward. Again, remember, whenever we're talking about growth, we're talking about changes in income. So today there's a lot of talk about China. The growth is slowing down in China. Now at the moment is about 6%. What does this mean? Yes? It's still growing. Remember that. Income is still growing. People are not becoming poorer. Imagine yourself, the income is still increasing, but at a slower pace. This is the classic mistake that people, keep making, the first years. They see the slowdown in growth as a decline in the standard of living. No. Remember that a slowdown in growth means your still income is rising, but a slower pace. As you can see, the income per capita in China has been constantly increasing. The growth rate is very volatile. Growth rate is very volatile. Income per person, income level per year is constantly growing. Again, a miracle story in your lifetime. Incomes rising from $2,000 per person in China to $12,000 in your lifetime. Magnificent story. Now, boring parts. Another measure from the GDP is GNP, gross national products. Anyone can define this? Hands, strains of hands? Yes?
Sometimes you have a country that has a branch in the UK has a corporation that has a branch in France.
Yeah.
Then in France there goes the UK.
Very good. So, when I'm talking about the gross domestic product of this room, I don't care. Yeah, let's assume that you're the population of the UK and I want to calculate GDP. I don't care where you're from. As long as you're generating your income in the area of UK, you're part of the GDP. But if I want to calculate GNP, I'm only interested in income of UK nationals. So I have to subtract the income of immigrants. I have to subtract the income of multinational companies that are non-British and are active in here. And I have to go to all the other countries, find the British citizens, put down their income and add it. Bring it back to Britain. And that's what we call GNP. Fairly easy. So, can you give me an example of a country that has a huge discrepancy between GDP and GNP? Hannah?
I was going to say Lebanon, but I'm not sure.
Lebanon. Okay, why Lebanon?
Because Lebanese go off what we don't say in the country. So we go on this sort of...
You're close, but we got more extreme examples in the Arab world. Yes?
I also think of Arab, but
Indonesia, why?
because many companies, like for example in Japan,
Yeah.
factories
Is dominated by the multinationals. I can think of, last one, yes?
Also the other way, for example, Poland, there's a huge income from the Polish citizens living in
Very
the UK,
good.
and the GDP might be much lower.
So which one is bigger in Poland, GDP or GNP? GNP, very good. The best example, the other way example, let me give you the other way example. The GDP is way larger than the GNP, is UAE, the Emirates. 10 million people, 9 million of them are immigrants. Another example that we can think of is Ireland. Something close to Indonesia, dominated by multinational companies. As you can see, the gross domestic product is way higher than the gross national product. And hence, we remember the story from Apple, right? The Apple in Ireland, they went there because of the tax incentives, and because of tax incentive, you had a lot of multinational corporations going there. And hence, the large discrepancy in the island. Very good. Another measure, why we call this gross, because we don't take into account one cost that is not paid to anyone, and that's depreciation. Depreciation is not a real cost, it's wear and tear. Depreciation is nobody else's income. Think of any costs in a business. When you incur that cost, it's someone else's income. A wage is the income of a laborer. Interest paid on the loans, income of the banker. The only cost that is nobody's income is depreciation. It's wear and tear. You don't actually pay it. So if we want to have the net domestic product, we need to subtract GDP, depreciation from the GDP. Any questions? Okay. Yes. The short answer is that I don't know. These are very complicated things, to be honest with you. When you get to actually calculating these, the experts know them. But the reason is that you get an idea why we call them gross. That's the main thing. We cannot calculate depreciation. Yeah? Yes?
Depreciation are also like with factories and old machines and old technologies and all that.
Yeah.
So that's why it's not.
Yeah. But at the level of company, it gets calculated every year. They say it as a cost. Yes? Sorry? Food waste, no. Why? Because you buy food from someone else.
value because it stays there for a longer time?
Oh, like, are you talking about a business that has an inventory, the inventory goes bad?
Yeah.
You have to throw that out.
Because that's essentially
Well, we don't call that depreciation. It's right. You're right. It's a cost that you don't pay to any. No, it's actually not a cost. No. You're still buying food from someone to sell it. So you already paid that person. Right? You're just losing the opportunity to earn more income. So this is not depreciation.
So that throwing away 20% of food doesn't affect the real GDP?
No. It's just a loss. You lost your opportunity to gain more income. Yeah? Think about this. A lot of companies make loss. Right? And they go out of business. They don't reduce GDP. Yeah? Yeah? Very good question. Thank you. Anyone else? Let's press on. A few more things, and we'll have a break about 5 minutes past. Okay? Now, the most important thing we talked about, Eric said about how do we measure growth. We measure income. Then we need to calculate the changes over year. And the most important thing is that let's imagine about your income. Let's say your income is rising by 20% per year. Does this mean that your standard of living is increasing by 20% a year? Is your purchasing power increasing by 20% per year? No. Why not? Inflation, exactly. What's your name? Sayada. Thank you. Because of inflation. So, we're interested in the changes of standard of living, the purchasing power. So sometimes the income is growing, but the prices are also growing. Okay? So, we have to subtract the inflation to find out what's happening to the purchasing power. So, I calculate your nominal income. What's your nominal income? Could you give me your nominal income?
Oh, I just need to give you a number.
Yes.
Oh, okay. 1,000.
1,000 per month, let's say. This is a very important thing. Income is a flow variable. Whenever I ask you, what is your income? The answer is X per amount of time. Remember that. Income is a flow variable. 1,000 per year. GDP in what amount of time? In a year? In 3 months? In 6 months? Always remember that. So, when you're presenting for me, right, you say GDP is 2,000, the first question I'll raise and distract your mark and say, are you talking about annual GDP? Are you talking about monthly GDP? Are you talking about nominal GDP or real GDP? So 1,000 per month. The next year is 1,200. This is your nominal GDP, your nominal income. I have to subtract it by the inflation to get the real changes. So we call this nominal GDP, right? The thing that you earn in numbers. I subtract inflation from it and get the real GDP, the real purchasing power. So this is a very important thing. Whenever you are giving me a chart about growth or evolution of income, you have to be careful whether we're talking about nominal changes in GDP or real GDP. Can you give me a rough idea about the inflation rate in 2008 in China? (2008). Yes?
It's much higher than the previous years?
Much higher than the previous year. Why? Very good. Why?
Because it's much higher than the region.
The gap is larger. Exactly. You can tell the evolution of it. It's, let's say, the nominal rate is about 25% growth. The real GDP is 15% growth, so we had about 10% of inflation. So although in nominal terms, in number terms, income was growing by 25%, 10% of it was inflation. We reduce that and we get the 15% increase in purchasing power. Yeah? And remember, when we're talking about current prices, GDP expressed in current prices, this is very important for your presentations, GDP expressed in current prices, it means nominal GDP. Nominal GDP doesn't take account of the inflation. So when you're searching on World Development Indicators to find the right graph for your presentation, you need to be careful. Am I talking about constant GDP or the current GDP? Okay? Now, so as we mentioned, this is for comparing income growth in one country through time. What has happening to the income in one country through time? The second comparison is across time. How do we compare GDPs or income levels across time? Any idea? You need to remind me of your name. Tresco. Okay. Yes?
You can use a constant like $2004.
To do what?
So you could assess the value of each, the size of each economy, express the value of each, express the size of the economy at a given point in time in $2004, for example.
So let's forget about 2004. You're saying that you can express the value of every economy in dollars. Okay. Yeah? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Why dollars?
Because it's the global currency. Oil is traded in dollars, so every country has dollars in their big foreign exchange reserves.
What if I calculated in Saudi riyal? Doesn't make a difference, right? Doesn't make a difference. The point is that we can express every economy into a single currency, that we can compare them. You know, the growth, the income in China is in yuan, in the UK is in pound, in Germany is in euros, in US in dollars. We can convert all of these economies into a single currency. It doesn't matter which. We pick dollar here. So how do we convert that? Raise of hands, please. Yes, Hannah?
You take the value of the dollar and you see what that equates to a value, let's say, a pound.
Okay, where do you find this? Online, Marks and Spencer, very good. We call this market exchange rate. You know, you go to the Marks and Spencer, you find the currency rate, you know. How much do you cover? I got 100 pounds, give me yuan, right? So, you use the market exchange rates, the ones that are used by the market to change your currency. So let's do this with yuan. The currency rate, let's say the GDP per capita in China is 35,000 yuan. This is actual numbers. In 2012, remember, per unit of time. 35,000 yuan in 2012. And I want to convert it to dollars. I go to the Marks and Spencer, see the exchange rate, and I see this is the exchange rate. 1 yuan is equal to 1/6 of a dollar. The other way, each dollar equals 6 yuan. So you divide. I always know that happens. It's a golden rule. The first marker never works. It's the golden rule. So $1, 6 yuan. Yeah? Each yuan is 1/6 of a dollar, or 0.16. Yeah. So we calculate our yuan, we multiply it by 0.16. So we should basically get 1/6 of our level, something close to $5,000. Yeah. So we divide the 35,000 by 6, we get the 5,700. We call this $5,000 in market exchange rates. In market exchange rates. So, if you look at your handouts, you got a list of countries, page 3. We converted all their GDPs from their domestic currency into dollars using market exchange rate. We went to Marks and Spencer, saw the exchange rate, we calculated and we got this comparison across countries. Now, what is the problem of this? Does this give us an accurate comparative picture? Is the standard of living that much different between Switzerland and the USA for each person? Anyone? Is the purchasing power, the standard of living, this much difference? Anyone? Yes? No. Why not?
Because prices in Switzerland and USA aren't the same. The inflation rate in Switzerland and USA isn't the same. Like, there's different factors outside the income which affects.
Again, you're right, complicated. Give me an easier answer. Yes? Income inequality. You? Cost of living differs. Again, inflation. Hannah?
Are we comparing real GDP here? Or is this
No, we're talking. It doesn't matter. I'll explain in a minute. Yes? We're talking about per head. We're already taking account of the population difference. Income is different, but we want to compare them. Let me give you this. Let's imagine that you have 100 pounds. Imagine things you can buy with 100 pounds here. Okay? Imagine a basket of services and goods. You go to Marks and Spencer, you switch all your pounds to dollars. You give 100 pounds, you get $150. You go to New York. Is your purchasing power the same? No. You always experience this in your every trip. In your every trip. That supposedly you have to have the same amount of purchasing power, you know? And you always get amazed. Why 100 pounds buys more in this country or less than the other country when I transfer it to the other currency, when I convert it? So the real issue is that this market exchange rate doesn't tell us anything about the purchasing power or the prices in the two countries. So we have to do completely another thing to compare the purchasing power of the two countries, to find out how much in purchasing power can 100 pounds buy in New York. Is it $180 or $120? So how do we do this in real world? By this. Imagine an identical basket of goods and services. We cannot put service in there. I cannot put haircut in there, okay? I cannot put leisure in there. But imagine an identical basket of goods. We go and see this costs $100 in the US, but 400 yuan in China. So, when it comes to purchasing power, the purchasing power of each dollar is 4 times of the purchasing power of yuan. Or the purchasing power of each yuan is 1/4 of a dollar. We call this rate the purchasing power exchange rate. Yes? The PPP rate. So, the same amount of yuan, this time we calculated, but we divided by 1/4. We divided by 4 rather than 6. We got a higher number, 9,000 yuans. Almost doubled the income per person when we use the purchasing power. Any guess why there's such a difference? I'll be impressed if someone can say this about China. Yes?
In China, most goods are produced in China, so they don't want to have any taxes.
Hamza?
Low cost of production.
No. Partly right, but anyone? I'm just having same number. I want more participation. Yes?
Lower wages?
You're partly right, but the first thing that comes to our mind is that when it comes, remember, when we go to Marks and Spencer, we use the market exchange rate. The Chinese government interfered with the market exchange rate in China. It deliberately keeps the value of its currencies cheap. So when we use that rate, we see that GDP per capita in China is very small because the government is manipulating that. Once we forget about that rate and think about the purchasing power, we see that in real terms, the standard of living of GDP per capita is higher in China. Yes? So, again, when you are comparing countries together, remember, where you're putting income per capita, comparing China with the USA, or giving me the income per capita of China in dollars, you have to tell me whether it's been calculated at the market exchange rate or PPP. You need to tell me whether it's constant prices or the current prices. So whenever you're expressing a GDP of a country in dollars, you need to tell me whether you use the market exchange rate or the PPP rate. Right? Sorry, you seem confused. All good?
Yeah.
All good.
To me or her?
Both of you. Questions? We'll take this question. We'll have a break. We'll come back. Yes?
So how do you try to calculate the purchasing power
How do you try?
of the individual?
We don't want to calculate in each individual. We want to calculate a rate. As I said, we compared identical basket of goods in two countries. We get a new exchange rate. We call that PPP rate. And we go to China and say, what's your income? And person tell me X amount of yuan per year. We use the PPP rate to convert it into dollars. That's all. So for the calculation, we just need to calculate once the PPP exchange rate. Yep. We use that rate for any income that we want to convert to the other. We'll be back at 4:15. Okay. Yes, yes. You take two identical basket of goods and you see how much does this cost in the US and how much does this cost in yuan, in China. Yeah. This identical basket of goods costs $100 in China. 100, you want to calculate the exchange rate. You think this identical basket costs $100 in the US, 400 yuan in that. So we could say each dollar, the purchasing power of each dollar is equal to 4 yuan. Or the purchasing power of each yuan is 1/4 of a dollar. 1/4 of a dollar. Yeah? Sorry? We have to do it for every country for the dollar. Now Indonesia we can do the same thing for the Indonesian. We get the identical basket, and we do this for all the countries in the world. Just a second, just a second. Just a second, just a second.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
Somebody said that apparently I missed the first part. I do apologize when you late on the train. So what are we doing
Everything
next
is
week?
recorded. Everything is recorded.
It's not recorded, so it's
Go to your tutorial and ask your tutor.
and it will be there. Okay.
You will find, and I'll let you know. Go to your tutorial.
Okay.
You'll find everything.
Next week, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So.
Yes. What's your name?
Cameron.
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 What's your name?
Abdul.
Abidol. Okay.
I was just wondering, I did not understand the difference between current pricing and
Do you understand the difference between nominal GDP and real GDP?
somewhat, because I haven't studied economics before.
Yeah.
So I mean,
As I said, let's think that your income is £1,000 per month. You get a raise to 1,200. Has your purchasing power increased by $200? No, maybe the inflation has gone up.
oh, I see.
Yeah? Imagine that the prices are going up by 50%. Right? So for the £1,000, now you have to pay £1,500 to get the same amount of goods. And your income was raised to what? So you're worse off. So your real change is minus 30%. Now, the constant is that when we take into account the inflation, I said the real change in your income is minus 30%. But before that, it's a nominal change. The nominal change, your income. So in real terms. Now, the constant takes account of the inflation, the current doesn't. What's your name?
Aggie.
Aggie.
Why are these two numbers different?
Which one?
So you were timesing this one. I understand the difference between the.
No, they should be the same.
They should
Yes,
be.
yeah. Let me double check. It's 35,000. Yeah. 35,000 is the same. We are converting the same number, but using different exchange rates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this should be the same.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, I think the one that different.
No. The first one is 35,464. Yeah. The second is the same, 35,000. Hi. Are you? Oh yeah. Where were you sitting? Yeah.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
One is, why did the number change here?
It didn't. No, it didn't. It's the same. Oh yeah, you're right. This should be 35. Just a second. No, you're right. It should be the same. It should be the same. Aggie, you're right. My mistake. Yeah. Its numbers should be the same.
I didn't really understand the depreciation. What do you mean that it doesn't sell to anyone?
Sorry?
What do you mean that
think of any, let's say you're running a company. You have costs. Give me costs. Like what? Yeah. Imagine you're a restaurant. You have a lot of costs to pay to run your business. What are those costs? Yeah. You pay the waitress. Your cost is her or his income. Yep. Raw materials. You buy meat from the supplier. You pay them. But for the wear and tear and machinery, do you pay anyone? Is it an annual cost that you pay to anyone? It just gets old and old and old. You don't pay anyone. The value of it is reduced. So it's very hypothetical. It's not an actual transaction that you pay to someone and it counts as a cost. It's a wear and tear of a car, of a machinery. We call that depreciation. So you don't pay it to anyone. Wear and tear. Sorry? Yeah. It depends on the good. It depends on the good. Yeah, it eventually needs to be. Think of your computer. The value of your computer in 5 years' time is 0. Each year, there's a cost. The wear and tear, it gets outdated.
But still, there is a value.
It's still a value, but yeah.
But if you buy it in the first year, then you won't add, with the reduced amount, you won't add it for the second year.
You would. You have, as a business, they do. Every year, they reduce the cost. Since you don't pay it to anyone, we cannot calculate it. It's something that you're losing, but it's very difficult to calculate. Yeah.
That's why you said you can't actually calculate it.
Sorry?
That's why you said you can't actually calculate it.
They can, but they do calculate it, but it's very difficult because they have to assume. They don't actually pay anyone. If they want to repair the machine, the cost of repair, you call a company, they come over, you pay. You put it in your book, this cost is someone else's income. But what about depreciation? You don't pay anyone, it just gets old. Got the answer? What's your name?
Risaka.
Risaka. Okay, shall we? Hello. An important change, thanks to Agi and Risako, yes? I realized that you should put the same number here, so this is 335,497. Yep. We're calculating the same number, my mistake. Thank you. Okay, now again, let's look at this difference when we're converting to depreciation is a good example of depreciation when so let's go back and see the difference. You got it in your handouts between the income. We're trying to, to compare countries together, the GDP of them. We need to convert all of their income to single currency. Yep. They have to be converted to either, it doesn't matter, dollars, yuan, or whatever. We're converting them to dollar here. Now, this time we're using the market exchange rate, and this time the purchasing power exchange rate. And sometimes we see a major difference, you know. That when we use the market exchange rate, we're inflating the standard of living of Swiss. Why? Because they got a very expensive currency. In China, it's the other way around, right? When we're using the PPP rate, we are deflating. When we're using the market exchange rate, we're deflating their real standard of living. When we use the PPP, the income per capita of China is almost double, and you see the difference. It increases by 58%, almost half. In Congo, it's almost 70%. So major differences, okay? And purchasing power parity is more reliable because we want to, in the end of the day, compare the purchasing power of each individual between countries, okay? So usually, I recommend you use PPP rates to compare the countries with each other. And this is another interesting exercise. You rank the countries, the largest economies in the world, using exchange rate or PPP rate. Again, note the difference with China. Here you got an interesting story here between UK and Sub-Saharan Africa. The population of UK, 80 million, roughly, thank you. Sub-Saharan Africa, about 1 billion. Okay? Same level of income per person. Right? So the average person in the UK has the same amount of purchasing power of average person of all the sub-Saharan African countries combined together. Interesting. Now anyway, this is for you to get an idea about the differences when we use the exchange rate and the PPP rates. Any questions? Let me go through the PPP calculation one more. We get an identical basket of goods. We see how much does this cost in China. We find that 400 yuan. Identical basket of goods, how much does this cost in USA? $100. So we found out that the purchasing power of each dollar is 4 times of a yuan. Or the purchasing power of each yuan is 1/4 to a dollar. That's our PPP exchange rate. We use that to convert yuans into dollars. The World Bank calculates this for every single country. You can go on their website. For every single country, you have the PPP exchange rate. Okay. Now, the shortcomings with the GDP. Problems with the GDP. First one, very, very well-known one. It doesn't talk about negative environmental externalities. If you're in Brazil, you cut down the tree in Amazon and sell them, the income of a country increases. The GDP increases. You're earning income. But this has a negative effect in the nature. And GDP doesn't take into account that negative effect. Right? Classic examples, when a car company produces cars, the income of that company goes up, but it's polluting the air. It's actually reducing values or harming other citizens, and we don't take that into account. Any questions? Fairly simple. The second one is the tricky one. The GDP excludes the value of public services. You get the NHS service for free. You get, many of the people in the UK get their primary educations for free. Right? GDP doesn't take into account the value of that. Now, people get automatically confused. If you go to the expenditure element of GDP, remember, if you go to page 1, there's an element called their government expenditures. Recalculating government expenditures is part of the GDP. The salary that we pay, the government, I pay taxes, the government pay the salary of that NHS worker. That's part of the GDP. But the service that NHS provides to us is not part of the GDP. Right? So, imagine that you wanted to go and get the same service you get in the NHS from a private hospital. You have to pay a lot of money, right? You still have to pay the salary of the nurse, but you have to pay profit to the owners of the hospital. In the government, you don't pay the profit. You just pay the salary to the nurse indirectly by paying taxes. This is very important, right? The government is not a profit-seeking entity. It gives you value, but it doesn't require profit. It just requires for you to pay for the cost of that provision of services, the cost of the nurse, the cost of the hospital. The other one is it excludes unpaid housework, the GDP. So a lot of economic activities taking place inside and outside the household. The best example is all the rearing and caring that women provide for children. It's not calculated in the GDP. It's very valuable for the standard of our living. Yeah? It's very valuable for the standard of our living. But because we don't pay for it or trade it, it's not in the GDP. So think about this, we get a lot of things, a lot of economic activities. We receive a lot of economic activities that matter a lot for a standard of our living. The healthcare, the education. Inside the home, you know, the rearing and caring of a woman. But these are not counted as part of the GDP. In a way, I think GDP is the most misogynist concept in the economics, right? Also, GDP doesn't take into account when you pay for something, but it is in the black market because it's illegal. So it's economic activity. Both sides are happy to exchange goods, okay? But it's in the black market. You don't count that in the GDP. The other example is that the other way around. We pay for a lot of things that are actually harmful for our standard of living, right? Alcohol is a good example. Which, you know, we buy a lot. Consider a person buy a lot of alcohol. Buy a lot of alcohol, an alcoholic. You're generating income for the person who's selling alcohol to you. But is their standard of living increasing? No. We pay a lot of money indirectly, you know, to wage wars with other countries. I pay tax, the UK government spend it on buying a tank from BAE company. My tax money is BAE's company's revenue. The GDP goes up. It generates income for that company. But is it good for my standard of living? Or think about divorce lawyers. When the couples want to get divorced, they go to a lawyer. They pay money to that lawyer to generate income. The income goes up. But is it good for standard of our living? Not necessarily. So, the last thing is that GDP excludes leisure. Imagine a workaholic American that works hard and earns a lot of money. I work harder and I get more income. Is my standard of living constantly increasing? I'm just working harder and harder to get a better jacuzzi, better limousine, you know, to keep up with the Joneses, right? My standard of living doesn't increase because after when I have minimum, leisure is very important. You take time and spend it with your family. And the GDP doesn't take that into account. GDP think of leisure as a lost opportunity to earn money. So, to put it in a nutshell, just a second, this kind of gives you an idea about the amount of hours worked across different countries. Trends in hours worked over time, annual hours worked per person employed in the US, UK, France, Japan, Germany, and South Korea. Interestingly, you see the difference between South Korea and Germany. Right. Can we see, of course, South Koreans imagine that you have a person that works harder, earns more money, but does that person have a higher standard of living? Second week, next week, we're going to get more philosophical about, is getting rich equating development? Can we reduce development to increase in income? Now, people have addressed this. Think about these problems. These problems are very technical. A defender of GDP can say to you, we can fix all these problems that you mentioned. Yes?
Sure. And you said that GDP is measured as an opportunity as a lost opportunity. Why is that? I thought the money spent on goods.
Just saying, I think of it as idle time. Just staying home doing nothing. Think of it that way. Let's simplify things for that. Yeah, it's not consumption, just staying home and not working, not doing anything. Think of it. In the world of GDP, we only create value when we buy and sell something to each other. If as a community, after our work, we go out and do a community project, it's not valuable for GDP. Because we're not trading anything. Right? Think of a community project done by Council House at the local level. Nothing is traded. Nobody is generating income for the other. A lot of activity is taking place, which is valuable. That increases our standard of living. It's not part of the GDP. Yes? Now, somebody can say that we can still fix problems. It's not a major problem. We can take into account all of these things in the GDP. We can, calculate the monetary value of the work done by women inside the house and include it in the GDP. We can calculate the monetary value of leisure and include it in the GDP. Now, there has been some attempt, this called this Index of Sustainable Economic Development, page 5. If you take a look at this, it says, extends GDP, GNP, gross national product, include a range of environmental factors, cost of commuting, personal expenditures on crime prevention, and unpaid household service. Basically, it takes account of all the things we said that GDP excludes. And you can see the difference, when you look at the index for sustainable economic growth in the US, it had remained constant, but the income per capita has been constantly increasing. So in a nutshell, think of the American society. It's the richest society in the world, but when they give you their income, it doesn't include a lot of information that is important about our standard of living. Yeah? Now, we dealt with all the issues with the problem of GDP. Now I want to devote the last part of our lecture to an important question. Okay, we're done with the problems of GDP. Think about this question. Your parents have a house, you're living in a house, and the value of that house is £200,000. Your parents decide to sell that house. They sell the house, they get £200 cash in their deposit. What happens to your family's income? Think about this, discuss this with the person next to you for 30 seconds. 1 minute, 1 minute. So what do you think? Does that matter? No, I'm not saying that whether the net effect they're going to pay more money or less. Just that transaction. Think about just that transaction. Does that transaction increases the household's income or reduces it? It doesn't change. Okay, any answer? Raise of hands. Yes? Stays the same? Okay. Anyone agreeing or disagreeing? Yes?
I agree. You've converted your wealth into money. So you may have had income previously and you bought a house with that.
Okay.
And then that's wealth now. And then you've converted that wealth back into money.
Okay, doesn't change. Who else? Any ideas? How many people think that it increases? Raise of hands. Raise of hands. Raise. Okay. How many people think that it decreases? One person. How many people think that it stays the same? Undecided? No? Okay, let's start with the increase. Can someone explain to us why it can increase? Yes?
So basically when you get this £200,000, you might put them into a bank deposit and then you get every month whichever is the percentage that the bank gives you.
I'm not talking about in the future, I'm just talking about this transaction. I'm not saying that you can use, you can do a lot of things with the money. Right, the question is about this transaction. Yes?
The income increases just for that period of time.
The income.
Stays the same.
In the long run, it stays the same. It doesn't, again, for that transaction, it increases. Yes?
Just for the short period of time.
Why?
Because income is a flow concept.
A flow concept. Very good. May I know your name?
Matteo.
Matteo. You?
I think it depends on the value of the house. Like if it's actually more than 200, and you at that time you sell it for 200, you actually make a loss. So your income goes down.
Okay.
Whereas if it's actually the value of the house was, let's say, 170 grand, and you sell it for 200.
Okay. Very good. May I know your name? Abs? Yeah. Abs and Matteo. They think the income increases. Now, let's think the house last year worth £180,000 and you're selling it for £200,000. The income goes up, yeah? What if the house was £240,000 last year and you're selling it for $200,000 this year? What happens to the income level? Raise of hand. Yes? It's a loss. It's a loss. So let's do the voting again. Last year it was £240,000. This year you're selling it for £200,000. You're getting cash. How many people think that your income increases? Raise of hand. Did you change your mind? Yeah. Reduce. How many think that it stays the same? Raise of hands. Let's assume, let me rephrase. Let's assume last year the value of the house that you were living in was £240,000. £240,000. You were living in it. This year the price dropped to £200,000. And you decide to sell your house for emergency reasons. Okay. Now, what is the effect of this transaction on your income, or family income? Does it increase your income? Stays the same? Stretch of hands. Could you raise your hands? It reduces your income. Okay. It stays the same. Why? Because your house, your chain, is your wealth. It's not your income. You're changing one form of your wealth to another. A house into a cash. So the most important thing that the students keep confusing is that they confuse income with wealth. Wealth is not a flow variable, it's a stock variable. When I ask you, what is your wealth? The answer is $2 billion. You don't give me time, but when I ask your income, you say £80,000 per year. So wealth is the accumulation. Where did you get all your household wealth? The car you have, the work of art, the house, the savings you have in the bank as a bank deposit. Through the years of hard working. Your family, the combined income of your parents were £80,000, 40,000 each. Their annual income. Of course, as a family, you spend some of this income on non-durable goods like food, clothing, drink. They perish. You spend some of it on durable goods like a car. You save some of it as bank deposit. You can buy a house, you can buy a work of art. These are wealth. When you sell your house, you're just changing one type of wealth into another type of wealth. I forgot your name, Safak? The first person nailed it. You're just changing one form of wealth to another form of wealth. So don't confuse income with wealth. So it doesn't matter what you earn out of the changes of value in here. The house prices go up, you sell it, you get the bank account. This is the change in the wealth. If you have bought a house, for £2,100, and this year is 250,000. You got it for £200,000, and this year is £300,000. You earn £100,000. That's not your income. You didn't earn anything. It's not part of your daily job, right? It's capital gain. Got to do with your wealth. It's nothing got to do with income. Now, any questions? Yes.
Actually, wealth will generate income.
Exactly my point. Is that your today's wealth generate income in the future. Okay? You're right. You earn interest from your back deposit. You might rent out your house. You don't actually earn any income from your work of art. Just watch it, right? Or you can, rent it for some people to watch it. I don't know. But some of these earn income in the future. But that doesn't relate to our question. The question is that when you change the composition of your wealth, does this change your income? No. Yes?
But the first transaction, when I buy the house from the constructor, this decrease my income? The first transaction?
Let's go for the first transaction.
Yes.
No.
The house is constructed and I buy the house.
Okay, what happens to the family's income? You got 200,000 of cash in the back deposit. You change it into a house. That's all.
But I have expenses.
Look, the question is what happens to the income of the family? Yeah. The income of the builder increases. Mm-hmm. Yeah? Yes. They've constructed a house and given to you. But the question was what happens to the income of the family? Mm-hmm. Nothing. The income of the family is that they're changing one form of wealth to another. Yeah? Imagine the car, example. You buy a BMW car. You're changing one form of wealth, your savings in the bank deposit, to a car. The income of the family doesn't change, but the money that you pay to the BMW is BMW's income. Okay? So don't get confused. The question was just about the family, income of the household. Yes?
So if you're earning money and that's your income, and then you put that into a savings account, are you converting income to wealth?
No, you're converting. No, that's your savings. part of your income, you spend it. The other part, your savings. Your savings is your wealth. But all these things become input for production for the others. But that's irrelevant to the question. The question was what happens to the income of the household. Now, next question, and we're going to close on that. Should we include oil exports in the GDP? How many people think yes? How many people think no? One person? Okay, yes, one person for yes. Could you explain why? We had a lot of yeses. Come on. Can someone explain why it increases? Yes?
Because the revenue from selling the oil will be gained by companies operating within the borders of the country. So,
border. Let's say that the foreign companies do this. The foreign companies extract oil. They sell it, like Saudi Arabia. You sell the oil for $100 per barrel. $20 you give it to the foreign nationals. £80 you keep it to yourself.
But are they operating in the borders of your country?
Doesn't matter. Should we include that $80 as the income of the country? Why shouldn't we? Okay, why should we?
I thought because if you're producing it within the country, it should go to...
Okay. Let me pose another question. You inherit a house from your parents. You sell the house. What happens to your income? Stays the same. It's the same with the country. You inherit a lot of wealth. You sell it. Does it increase your income? No. You're changing one form of wealth, natural wealth, into dollars. So technically, we are selling our wealth. It's not an income. You're selling the family inheritance. Here, the natural inheritance. So, it is wrong to include oil exports as part of the GDP, but is usually done, and that's a mistake. Think of the deforestation example. We cut down the trees, we sell them. The income rises, but in reality, we're changing one form of wealth into cash money. Yes, your hand was up first. Yep.
So every time you extract oil from there, there's added value to the product.
Okay.
So I agree with you that you should not have actual oil, but added value should be...
If you want to rephrase the story to your inheritance of the family, that would be like this. Imagine that you inherit a house, you renovate it, you sell it. Your renovation is an effort, right? But the difference that you gain, which is a lot of difference, it's not your income, right? So you're right. So imagine, for every, Saudi Arabia sells each barrel of oil for $100, it used to be, let's assume, $100 per barrel. The cost of extraction was £20. The rest of the 80 is just luck. Sorry? Yeah. You're selling your inheritance. The $80 per barrel is a conversion of wealth from underground into cash in a bank account. So let me end by giving a summary. Now, why I asked you to come over from 3 p.m. in this beautiful day. Because we care about economic growth. Economic growth is a measure of progress. Increase in income per person. Right? We can, I hope, at least agree that major part of growing out of poverty and becoming developed is that you gain money. Right? Get out of desperation. Now, how do we calculate economic growth? Is the change in the GDP, which equates GNP and GNI in a given period of time. Remember, income is always expressed in a given period of time. We talked about comparison of GDP across countries. Remember, when we want to analyze the changes in income level, we have to take account of the inflation. The nominal values are increasing, but maybe the prices are increasing at a faster rate. So, when we're analyzing changes in income across time, we have to take account of the constant prices. We have to take account of the inflation. Comparing GDP across countries, we used two measures. We used market exchange rates, the ones you find in the M&S, Marks and Spencer, and we had a better measure of purchasing power, right? It's called PPP exchange rate. Remember, the exchange rates in the Marks and Spencer don't tell you anything about the differences in purchasing power in the two countries. So that's why we are calculating PPP. We talked about problems with GDP. It includes a lot of things that are harmful for a standard of living, and it excludes a lot of things that are beneficial for standard of living. And finally, don't confuse income with wealth. Income is a flow variable, wealth is a stock variable. Thank you. Yes.
So that it's actually just a lucky case that you have inherited the oil, but it's actually like in BMW, we have wages for workers, we have rents for plants, and so on. But the same for oil as well.
Yeah, but that's for the extraction. All of that cost, you're selling oil for $100 per barrel. All of the costs of extraction is $20. That is part of your income. The rest, is it part of your income? The $80. Is it? No. So the extraction is something valuable. It's part of the income. But the difference is not. Imagine that you inherit a house from your parents. You sell it without renovation. Is this part of your income? No. You renovate it and you sell it. The money, the added value because of your renovation, you're welcome, is part of your income.
Yeah, but the oil is there, but I don't have it. I can't go with the bag and take it.
Exactly.
Value doesn't change.
But you have to do the effort that you put to do this is part of your income, but the rest is not. Imagine you inherit a house for $100,000. You renovate it, you sell it by $120,000. The $20,000 is your income, but the $100,000 is not. It's the exact thing with oil. Yeah, thank you. Let's leave the lecture theater quicker. We got a class afterwards. Yes.
That's just a textbook that you gave.
Everything is in the course guide. We'll talk about this in the tutorial. Yeah. The details will be given in the tutorial. Yeah. Everything will be given you in the tutorial in the course guide.
Okay.
There's a course guide. It's the Bible for the course. Everything is there. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Question. You talked about some of the production approaches in measuring GDP.
Yeah.
They only included up to 3 of like the primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors.
Yeah.
Why not the quaternary?
What? Sorry.
Why not quaternary sector?
It's just a name. We don't have such thing. It's services. IT is services.
But not included.
Yeah, it is.
It is?
IT is part of services. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't do economics.
Yeah.
I do it as an option module. My degree is called development studies.
Yeah.
I think it's because I was interested in development in Africa and Asia. So
Have you heard anything?
I don't. This is just an option.
Just a second. Just a second. Let me